you would say absolute moral laws exist where, what would be your justification for saying there is absolute moral laws? Just
Based on God's revelation, based on the character of God.
Based on the character. But now this might be to do with the way it's being defined, the way you're using the definition of absolute. But if it's more or less contingent upon God, if there was no God, there, in your opinion, there would be no absolute moral laws. Would that be correct?
I'm saying that's an impossible hypothetical. But let me give you an example.
Okay.
When God says, "Thou shalt not steal," it's not because he's decided that stealing is wrong. It's not that he has a standard that he says, "Well, stealing is wrong, so I'm going to say it's wrong." That's not the reason stealing is wrong. The reason that stealing is absolutely morally wrong is because God is not a thief, and we are created in his image. So we're not to steal because we're put on this earth to represent God. And that's why it's an absolute moral law.
See, the way I would see it is it almost seems that these things are contingent. It's because God is the way God is.
Well, that's right. They're contingent on his character. You're absolutely right.
But would that not mean
God can only be the way that he is?
Definitively, would that not mean it is subject to God, subjective?
Well, it is based on God's
semantics?
Absolute objective character. It's not subjective because God is absolute. But anyhow, I mean, at this point, all you're doing is agreeing or disagreeing with them. I mean, I think you understand what they mean.
Okay, yeah, I think I was just trying to work out the semantics between, of if it's contingent on something.
It's absolutely dependent on the character and nature of God, which is unchanging.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess Andy and I would have a slightly different sort of view on that, given our worldview.
Right.
We would say morality is subjective. It's dependent upon. Everyone has their own idea of what's morally right and morally wrong.
Right.
And I can give a very sort of simple analogy where someone would ask you, should you say to that person they look fat when they wear those jeans? Like very, very simple, very easy question. And some people would say, yes, you should. They might have reasons why. Some people would say, no, that's immoral. Some people say, being honesty is the more moral. So we have a difference there. Although you throw up a different example. If I go and click absolute moral laws do not exist,
right.
We go for a more touchy subject. And I appreciate that, because obviously to explore these questions properly, you do have to go to the extreme ends to see how they hold.
Right. Well, what I'm not saying is that we know the absolute moral about every circumstance, like whether you should tell your wife she looks fat in that dress. I'm not saying that we know the absolute moral of each circumstance, but I'm saying the question I'm asking is, do absolute moral laws exist? And in order to have that question answered, I go to an extreme, disgusting case to see where people stand on that. So you're right. I do go to an extreme.
Okay, and I don't have any issue with that personally. I think it can be very effective for conveying a point.
And the thing is, one thing I'd like to add too is one of the things I say is molesting children for fun. Now, I would say that molesting children under any circumstances is absolutely morally wrong. But the reason that I add that is because you would be surprised at the emails I get. What if somebody was going to kill 1 million people unless you molested that person? Would it be wrong? I would say yes, it would still be wrong. However, I just want to prevent getting all of those emails. I still get them, mind you. They try and twist it. But I say for fun, just to put, to show that there is an absolute moral standard and to see, what people's position is on that. Okay.
I'll give what I would try and describe my position on this and see if Andy would agree with me or if he wants to add or say something slightly different on this. For me, when I look at the subject of morality, I'll take this example of molesting children for fun. I would sort of say, okay, why is it wrong? What is the attribute of this act that we are observing and saying that part is wrong? And as far as I'm concerned, it comes down to a negative correlation, like a negative experiential correlation, something that some negative experience to the conscious. Yeah, negative effect. Now, I think I'm talking from the perspective of consciousness here.
Yeah, but negative effect is begging the question, of course.
Well, I don't really see how it is, if you mind me stepping in here.
No problem.
Molesting children for fun, while most people, 95% of all people, would agree this is abhorrent, should never be done, we should condemn anyone who considers it. It's not absolutely morally wrong just because it is, or just because it's a reflection of God. in your position. It's morally wrong because of the effect. And I know you said it's begging the question, but I don't think it is. At least from our perspective,
right.
When we decide if something is right or wrong, it's because of an effect. If, for instance, molesting children for fun did not result in psychological damage, did not result in physical damage, did not result in any sort of negative effect, it would not be morally wrong. But it does.
But what I'm saying, sorry, Andy, sorry for jumping in, but what I'm saying is that you're calling that a negative effect. You're moving the goalpost. I could say, why is that negative? That could be the very effect that the molester wants to achieve.
But it's negative for the person experiencing it. You see, it doesn't matter what the molester is trying to achieve. The point is that the person they're inflicting this upon is experiencing a negative effect. They are being harmed.
Sorry, Andy, but again, that's begging the question. They might find it to be negative, but the thing is, that's begging the question that is actually negative. They might not like it. All you're saying is that they don't like it. You're saying they don't like being molested, but you can't say it's wrong. You can't say it's a negative effect. They don't like it. Big deal.
So maybe it's a definition problem, but if I were to define negativity as harm.
Yeah, but harm is also begging the question.
How?
How do you define what's harm? What's harm to you might be not harm to me.
And that's where it would come in. If we were to do an action that's not harmful to you, then it wouldn't be immoral, at least if we're only looking at it from the harm point of view.
No, but what is harm, though?
Harm is something where there's a negative experience which has...
we could even take this a little bit further. Let's say that we defined it as a negative experience. You still can't tell me why we can't cause negative experiences on other people. Why is that wrong? Why can't I get my jollies doing that and saying, well, that's right because I happen to be the most powerful. And what makes me happy is causing other people's negative effects and causing them harm. So even if you could define it, you still can't tell me why it's wrong.
Well, it's wrong for us because we would say that it is wrong to harm people in this way because this is not the way we want to be treated.
Yeah,
and it's in this essence that we see morality as being subjective.
But the problem with that is when you say it's wrong for us, somebody could have the exact opposite opinion about the exact same thing, and you have no basis for differentiating them. Because you might say it's wrong for you, and I could say, well, it's right for me.
And I would say that it would be the idea of having like an absolute moral system, and if everyone agreed upon it, would be nice, because it would help getting along better. But the fact that I see that doesn't exist, that isn't there.
Yeah, but you're confusing behavior with standard. Because, I could say it'd be very nice if everybody did the speed limit. Doesn't mean there's no speed limit.
But the speed limit was put there by we
right,
arbitrarily.
It's not a perfect analogy, but let's say there was an absolute speed limit. Doesn't mean all people are going to adhere to it. It would be nice if they did, but that question has nothing to do with whether or not there's an absolute speed limit.
Okay.
I had a few thoughts. The first was, even if we all define harm and negative effect differently, right? Let's have a hypothetical where every person on Earth has no interaction with each other. I know that sounds absurd, but let's think that's true. Upon interacting with somebody else, whatever each individual person construes as a negative intrusion upon them is harmful, okay? Which means that it is subjective to think what's harmful, but the fact that they do think that is harmful to them makes it so. So, yes, some people may think it's not harmful to rape or murder or whatever, but the people they're raping and murdering do. And that's the standard. The standard is that you are intruding upon them.
Yeah, but what makes it wrong to violate that standard?
Well, there is no absolute objective reason.
I think it's in the same sense. There's no absolute wrong. From this perspective, if one country decides to go to war with another country and kill a bunch of other people, they don't care about the people in their country. But generally, because the people of a country want to stay safe, we try and avoid war because we understand that the things that we didn't want that thing to come onto ourselves. I know if I be mean to someone else, it's more likely they're going to be mean towards me. And so it's kind of a... I'm trying to find a better phrase of mutual deterrent.
Right. The thing is, though,
mutually ensured destruction.
Morality is defined as an ought. You cannot get an ought without God. All you can get is an is. You can say, well, this causes harm, this causes destruction. Who cares? Why ought you not do that? That's the question. That's
but
what morality
here's the answer, though. And you say it's begging the question, but oughts, of course, have conditions. Your condition is you ought not do it because it's either because God says it or because it's a reflection of God, right?
It's based on his character, that's right.
Sure. And you ought not do it for that reason. From our perspective, you ought not do this because it is not in everyone's best interest.
But that's arbitrary.
It is arbitrary, but that's
so
the point.
Yours.
No. See, well, you have to admit that if God exists, if he's all-powerful, he's all-knowing, and he has an unchanging character, that I have a standard for absolute morality. You might disagree with it, but to deny it doesn't really make sense.
Well, that sounds more like you have an authority in which it comes from, the same sense that in a country, you have whoever the prime minister, in my opinion, or president is of the country. They may give laws, and that might be your standard for something. But now it's not a perfect analogy because it's another man, which you would say is fallible.
Right, it's an arbitrary because the next country could think something different, and everybody in that country could disagree with the fellow. So it's completely arbitrary. You cannot have morality because morality is an ought. And now you can say, well, because, I like it. That's not an ought. And the thing is, and, you can take that a step further. You can go to evolutionary principles. Evolution can only tell you, if it were true, it can only tell you what is the case. It cannot tell you what ought to be the case. No. Because what you come up with is a pragmatic answer that we do this for survival. We do this for happiness. We do this. But the thing with pragmatism is pragmatism cannot give you the proper goal. Because if I said to you the proper goal was to serve God, then you would have to develop your morality around that. But if you say the proper goal is for happiness, well, then your morality would develop around that. But I'm saying that if you develop your morality around arbitrary standards, you don't get morality. You get moral preferences. And if morality can be stipulated, anybody can stipulate their own.
Yeah, and to be honest, I agree with that. I just don't see that as necessarily as an issue.
Well, that's fine. Then we can just keep going in the site, and you can answer the question how you would answer it.
Okay.
And we'll see what happens.
I feel this is a little semantic trick here. If it says, catch the words, molesting children for fun is not absolutely morally wrong. Now, if I click that, it will load up. If you truly believe that there is no such thing as absolute morality, then there would be no right or wrong. Now, I think that is worded incorrectly there. I think it should be worded, and you might see where I'm getting at when I reword it. If you truly believed that there was no such thing as absolute morality, then there would be no absolute right or absolute wrong.
Well, what's the difference? You can't have a degree of right. It's either right or wrong.
You can have right or wrong dependent upon a standard.
Right.
It's conditional.
Yeah, that's right. And since you have no standard, you can't have right or wrong.
We do have a standard. The standard is harm.
No, well, that's an arbitrary standard. That's the point.
It is an arbitrary standard, but that's not a problem.
Here's where I think maybe you could explain it in a way that we might see this better, perhaps. We see, yes, it's an arbitrary standard based upon what we decide is moral and whatnot.
Right.
But we see yours as being arbitrary as well, because it's arbitrary based on God, and God is the way God is, just because God is that way. Well,
he can't be any other way. So, I mean, we disagree with that. But it's not arbitrary. If you're saying
God cannot be any other way,
right,
that would render God arbitrary. It just is. God is just the way God is, for no reason, for no cause. There's nothing before God. So, in what sense? I think we're failing to understand in what sense yours is not arbitrary.
Because it can't change, and it's not based on opinion. It's not based on anybody's whim. It's based on the character of an unchanging God. But let me get back to the question you were talking about. If you don't have a right or wrong, then you can't have a standard. Well, if I say 2 plus 2 equals 4.
Okay.
Now, if somebody says 2 plus 2 equals 5, I can say that's wrong because I know that the answer is 4. But you can't say that 5 is wrong if you don't have a standard. And that's what I'm saying. You can say, well, according to my standard, the right answer is 3. So that's why I can say 5 is wrong.
But now, I think I know what your objection to this is going to be, but I'm going to go ahead this anyway, because I'm going to use this. If I would say, okay, if God changed or God was not God anymore, then this standard would be gone, right? But of course, your answer is God is unchanging.
Well, it's an impossible hypothetical, yeah.
Right. Why is it an impossible hypothetical? Because God is defined as being as such?
No, because he's revealed that he cannot change. That is his character. That's his nature.